Hello and bonjour everyone. This video today is going to be a little bit special. I'm going to give you a lesson on the wheat grain and the various types of flour. So if you want to know everything about flours and how to choose it properly, stay with me until the end of the video because it's going to be very interesting. Let's start this video with the origin of flour, the wheat grain. You should know that wheat is the most consumed cereal in the world, along with rice and corn. And for your information, the largest wheat producers in the world are, in the first place, the European Union, and no, it's not a country. In the second place, we have China, third is India, and fourth is USA. Next, a very important thing. We will look at the composition of the wheat grain, and precisely the cross-section of a wheat grain. The entire central part, which represents about 80 to 85% of the grain's weight, is called the starchy endosperm. Then, all the outer parts that makes up the grain, from 13 to 15% of its weight, are simply the outer layers. Next, you can find the germ, which represents 2 to 3% of the grain's weight. And finally, we'll finish with the protein layer, which represents 3 to 5% of the grain. It's also important to know that, in general, the size of a wheat grain is about 6 to 7 mm, its width is 2 to 3 mm, and its shape is generally ovoid, more or less elongated, depending on the different types and varieties of wheat grains. Then, to recognize the wheat grain properly, you need to know its general appearance. You have the ventral face, the front that has a groove, then you have the dorsal face that has a germ, and finally, the very small end that has the fine hair called brushes. So I tried to find the translation of all the English names, so if I made a mistake, I'm sorry about that, don't forget I'm French. So now, I'm going to detail a little bit more the four parts we saw earlier of a wheat grain. We'll start with the starchy endosperm. So, the starchy endosperm is actually composed of two essential components of flour. It's simply starch, which is the form of granules, and it belongs to the carbohydrate group, so it actually feeds the yeast and all the dough to ferment. It's sugar. Then you will find the gluten, which are proteins. It's insoluble, but it becomes soft and elastic in water. And also, it has the property of coming together to form an elastic tissue. And its quantity plays a very important role in the characteristics of the dough. Simply, the more gluten you have, the stronger and firmer the dough will be. Next, the second part is the outer layers, as I mentioned at the beginning. They are made up of superimposed layers that protect the grain because in nature, every seed, every cereal, every product of nature has a protective layer. A banana has its skin, the same for an apple. Furthermore, every fruit protects the seeds inside, and these same seeds are protected by outer layers. So for the grain, they are formed by different layers and protect the grain. They are super important because they are rich in minerals, but they do not contain starch. So when you mill the grain, these parts become bran. Next, there's the germ, which constitutes the plant's embryo. However, it is removed during milling because it contains fat, and these fats are harmful to the flour's preservation. Now let's talk about the cultivation and storage of grain. For cultivation, wheat belongs to the grass family and is generally sown in autumn, in October and November, or in spring around April, or even both, depending on the varieties. The harvest takes place in summer, in July and August. An interesting piece of information to note is that in the past, wheat was harvested by hand with a sickle, while today it is done by a combine harvester, as everybody knows. So, in France at least, because I don't know maybe in your country, there are three different types of cultivation. Intensive cultivation, resonant cultivation, and organic cultivation. But I won't go into details here. If you want a video explaining everything in details, let me know in the comment, and I'll make one. In short, intensive cultivation is intensive, with the use of chemicals. Resonant cultivation falls between organic and intensive cultivation, and organic cultivation is more natural. So after wheat cultivation, let's move on to storage. Wheat is directly placed in structures called storage organisms, which are in fact large tanks and silos. They are used to protect wheat from weather variations, insects and animals, as well as to prevent wheat from molding due to moisture. Silos are equipped with dryers to keep the wheat grain's moisture below 16%. Regarding wheat species, there are more than 200 varieties cultivated in France, and we'll focus on the two main ones, soft wheat and durum wheat. Soft wheat is rich in starch. Its gluten is soft and elastic, making it the most cultivated wheat in France for baking, and is very good for making good bread. Durum wheat, on the other hand, is low in starch but rich in gluten. It lacks flexibility, but it's perfect for making pasta, semolina, and similar products. Once the grains are well dried, milling is done to obtain flour. Wheat milling is done in a mill, where the miller removes most of the layers and the germ, thus reducing the starchy endosperm to flour. There are two milling techniques, stone milling and roller cylinder milling. I will talk about the different stage of roller cylinder milling because it's the most commonly used method by millers in France. The wheat is first weighted, then the largest or heaviest elements as well as the smallest or lightest one are removed. Next, the wheat is cleaned with water, sometimes several times, before being allowed to rest. This facilitates the separation of the starchy endosperm from the layers, just like when you soak beans before cooking them. So once the wheat is clean and moist, it passes several times between rollers, cylinders, to break the layers and separate the starchy endosperm. The starchy endosperm becomes flour, while the layers becomes bran. Okay, so now that you have an idea of how wheat is transformed into flour, let's move on to the different types of flour, which is very important because it will help you to choose the proper flour before making bread. There are several types of flour. You have the very common wheat flour used for making regular bread. They are allowed to contain improvers in France. It's like the cheap flour, like the most common one. Then there's the French tradition flour, regulated for bread making in France since 1993. With specific criteria for authorized correcting products, so you can't put any kind of improvers inside. Then whole wheat flour, also known as wholemeal flour, contains both the starchy endosperm, so the very center of the grain, and the layers of the wheat grain. In France, it's generally called type 150. Then you have the organic flour. They are from organic farming, without chemicals or pesticides, and they are available in different types, so from T50 to T150. T50 is the white flour, the very white flour, and T150 is the wholemeal flour. You can have some T70, T80, T100, and it's basically all type of flour between the white one and the wholemeal one. Then there is the beet flour. It's a flour high in fiber and it gives bread a grey color. Common types are pretty much T80 or T110, but it's not very used much in France. Then you have the stone ground flour. This one, if you remember, I talked about two types of way to mill the wheat. So there's the roller cylinder way and the other one is a stone ground way. So this flour is obtained by grinding grains between two different stones and it produces coarser flour. And usually you will have the types 80 to 150. It's very difficult to have the T50, so the very white flour, with this type of grinding. Then you have the gruau flour, also known as a strong flour, T45. This one generally comes from soft wheat, selected for its high gluten content. Then finally you have the US flours. This one, US for special purpose, which include pastry flour, a low-strength white flour, and any other special types for specific use. And in pastry, there are also other types of flour to be aware of. For example, you can have some flour specific for biscuits, which has very little elasticity, and you have a lump-free flour, characterized by flour granules of different size to prevent small flour lumps. So the flour is made for some purpose. You can't take any flour for the bread. You can try, but in general, it's better to choose the proper flour you need. Okay, let's take a moment to talk about something. Do you like this video? Because if you do, you should like it, subscribe, and you can even comment it. And now let's keep going with the video. So as you know, the wheat is a cereal, and there's also some flours from other cereal. So for example, there is the rye flour, and rye is commonly used by bakers after wheat flour. And there's different types of rye flour. There are T70, T85, T130, and even T170. The choice of the flour determines the name of the bread in France. For example, if you have a bread with 0 to 10% of rye flour, you get a country bread, while with 65% of rye flour, you get pure rye bread. Also, rye flour is also used in pastry for kind of sweet bread, like gingerbread for example. Then there are other less common flours to be aware of. You can find buckwheat flour, also known as black wheat flour. There's also the rice flour, and this one is the richest in starch. It's used in many forms, but rarely for making bread. You can also find the barley flour, while it's impossible to use alone for baking, but you can mix it with wheat flour to get a firmer and sticky dough. Oat flour, similar to barley flour, this one is not usable alone also, but mixed with wheat flour, it creates a unique bread. You can make oat bread. There's also corn flour. This one is usually mixed with wheat to make corn bread. It is mainly used for cornflakes and cornstarch because it's a gluten-free flour. And finally, there's the spelt flour, a cousin of wheat. It's sometimes mixed with wheat flour and has a delicate nutty flavor. And also to finish, there's other flours to mention. For example, you can find the kamut in French, which comes from ancient wheat varieties and is often available in organic versions, and you can find it in organic shop. This flour is usually whole grain, meaning, like I explained before, it contains all parts of the grain. It's recommended for wheat allergies. Triticale flour. It's a cereal that appeared in France in the 80s, and it's kind of hybrid of rye and wheat, making it an interesting option in terms of production and taste. There's also mixed flour, and those ones, they are produced by mills to help bakers diversify their production. These blends can contain various cereals, whole grain or other ingredients, but they can sometimes lead to standardization of bread taste, which doesn't appeal to everyone. Let me know if you want to know more about this, because it's a very important topic in my opinion, because this group of mills, they actually kill the knowledge and they actually kill the independent bakeries in France. So if you want to know more about this, just let me know in the comment. Then there's some non-cereal flours, and those ones, they don't come from cereals. You can find soy flour, which contains little starch, lots of protein and fat. It's often used in preparations for diabetics as well as in the making of cakes and madeleine when mixed with wheat flour. It can also be used as an improver in making bread. Chest flour, and this one is obtained by a fruit similar to the chestnut. Bread with this flour has a very sweet and characteristic taste. It makes it quite popular for Christmas in France. You also have the potato flour, although it's often associated with making mashed potatoes or fries, but its use in bread making is much more rare. Cottonseed flour, those ones are generally used in the textile industry. Their use in cooking is very rare, but they can be incorporated in small quantities into sweet preparation for special results. And to finish, you can also find the cassava flour, obtained from the root of a tropical shrub. Then you have the dietary flours. You can find the bran flours, and those ones are wheat flours enriched with the whole wheat grain husk, rich in fibers and beneficial for intestinal transit. Gluten flours enriched in proteins and depleted in carbohydrate, recommended for diabetics. And also you have the gluten-free flours, intended for people intolerant to gluten. Then you can find the vitamin-enriched flours, simply enriched with vitamins. You also have mineralized flours enriched with minerals and trace elements. And to finish, ancient flours. It can be different type of cereal because it refers to ancient or non-modern wheat varieties. And generally, those wheat varieties contain much more nutrients inside. Then you have the commercial flours. So those ones are commercial flours with registered trademarks in France, such as Banette, Baguepi, La Ronde des Pins, which aim to help customers choose quality products or help bakers in their production. But this topic could be further explored in a future video, because these are trademark brands that impact the bakery industry. And I'm gonna explain briefly why. They are flours subject to strict specifications, and bakers who use them generally have to undergo regulated training. And additionally, there are labeled flours. So there are some with label rouge, there are those from the organic farming, or flours with regional labels, and even those with a European label. And all these flours have something special, because these flours distinguish themselves by their geographical origin, manufacturing method and terroir. They say that it's a guarantee of quality. More or less interesting, that said, because for example, if you buy European label flour, you know it should come from Europe. However, it may come from countries like Romania, and if you are in France, this is not really eco-friendly like they say. Okay, so the video is coming to an end. I hope this video has been very interesting for you. For my part, I enjoyed making it. If you have any question, please feel free to ask in the comment. If you're interested in other topics, let me know also. So I hope you know a little bit more about the flours and wheat grain you use every time you make bread. I think it's important to make informed choice when you buy your own flour, based on your preference and cereal type. Don't always listen what the seller is saying. It's better to know what you buy than what they say. In conclusion, have a good day, keep making bread, and see you in the next video. Bye!